that school didn't about job search and career growth. And today is sort of a part two. We're going to be talking about the 3 questions you should be asking in interviews post-crisis. Earlier this week on the show, we talked about how to answer certain questions in a way that will really resonate post-crisis and how you have to pay attention to what we call your professional presence. So if you missed that, make sure you go back and watch the recording. But as I pointed out in that session, about 70% of successful interviewing is how you answer the questions they ask you. But 30% of it is how you ask questions, what you ask, and why. And so that's what we want to get in today is sort of the magic or the secret sauce in your interviews as you go forward. And I'm really looking forward to that. But before I begin, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow, I am going to be doing a very special live webinar called the 5 Mistakes to Avoid in Your Post-Crisis Job Search. So this is based in a ton of research that I've done over many years, myself and the team at Work It Daily. And there are some classic mistakes that people make, especially if they don't understand the new rules to job search. So if you've never seen this before, please come join me. It will be 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. And again, I'm going to walk you through the 5 mistakes that you're going to want to avoid when you're looking for work post-crisis. Really timely information. I hope that you come join me. The other thing I want to mention as a reminder is we have so many free resources available at Work It Daily. In fact, I want to tell you a quick story about that as my friends here, my teammates, post our free resource link. I got the sweetest message yesterday. It was the second one of this type in the last week where they said to me, JT, after a year of following you and seeing how much free information you're giving away, I finally decided to join Work It Daily out of guilt. And I thought, what? What do you mean guilt? But they went on to explain that they said they'd gotten so much value and it had helped their career and their job search so much that they thought they felt guilty. They felt like they should invest, and they saw that we are, less than a gym membership, less than the cost of your coffee. In fact, our new tagline is Work It Daily, the Peloton for your career. That's what we're going to go with now. But anyways, this person said, I joined out of guilt because I just had gotten so much out of your free stuff. I thought I would just give you a little money because it's very little and see what you're doing on the inside. And of course, then they went on to say, why did I wait so long, and how amazing the community is, and our elite coaches that are working inside the program, and all the videos and resources that you get all in one place. And oh yeah, by the way, it's a phone app. We are literally the only social distancing job coaches that you will find. So I just want to say shout out and thank you to that individual. You know who you are because I know you're here watching today. And say, here's the thing, folks. If you're not checking out our free resources, please do. We have so many of them, especially the one that we're sharing with you today, which are the 18 most common interview questions, which again is part of this whole series this week around interview prep for post-crisis. Okay. All right. Enough about our free resources. Enough about the webinar I'm doing tomorrow. Let's get down to the business of talking about the 3 questions you need to ask in interviews post-crisis. So what I want you to remember, again, is what you ask is almost as important as what you say. 30% of how well you're going to do in this interview is going to come down to the kinds of questions that you ask. So you got to ask yourself why. And that's because well-crafted questions that you ask, the right questions, will not only show your intelligence, the fancy word for it is gravitas. You'll hear that word kicked around a lot. And it simply means your depth of knowledge, your intelligence about the industry, about the subject matter, about the job that you're doing, right? Good questions will show how smart you are in that area, but they'll also show your humility. And that is going to be huge post-crisis because we've had a profound thing happen to all of us. Everyone's been affected in some way by this crisis. And to not have a level of emotional intelligence and sensitivity to that and understanding and appreciation is going to backfire you. And you're thinking, well, how could that possibly be in a job interview? Well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how these 3 questions show that you understand they've been through something very profound, that you respect it and that you understand it and that you want to learn from it so that you can do a better job. So let's think about that for a second. Here's the fact. If a business isn't growing, it's dying. This is something that my late dad taught me early on. He taught me, gosh, I can't believe how many great business things he taught me. But he said, look, JT, if a business isn't growing, it's dying. A business always has to evolve and grow or it's not going to sustain itself. Well, we've just gone through a tsunami in the business world. Every company, with the exception of a few, right? Like I joke, like Peloton grew 66% in the last 6 weeks. That's an anomaly. Yes, there are certain businesses that have exploded as a result of this crisis, but they're very few. 3% compared to 97% that have been hit the other way. So every business is essentially going to be contracted when this is over and need to get back into growth mode. If they don't, then they're dead. The business won't survive. And we know this to be true. So think about how profound that is. It doesn't matter who you interview with post-crisis. They are going to be thinking about their growth. Most companies, as I said, will be contracting post-crisis. So contracting simply means is that they will get themselves to a size, which will be smaller, of course, that's profitable because they have to know that they're able to stay in business. Then they're going to say, all right, what is our new co-model? So what does new co mean? That means new company. Every company right now is operating in their old company style and suffering. So they're all sitting there saying, what does our new co look like? What is our new reality? And how do we have to change every single aspect of our business model needs to be evaluated and probably adjusted in some way. So essentially, we will never be the company we were. Our old co is gone. Our new co needs to be born. And so they do that in a contracted state because they need the time to really figure out what that new co is so that they can grow. So they've got to be smaller and profitable. So they've got the ability and they're not stressed out as they're sitting there losing money and going out of business. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, all businesses are going to contract, 97% of them, so that they're at least profitable or break even. And they're going to give themselves their time to figure out what their new co-model looks like. And then they're going to go into growth mode. This is huge, folks. It is so hard to build a business. 1 out of 3, I think it's 2 out of 3 maybe, startups fail. 2/3 of startups. To build a business that stays in business is so ridiculously hard. And I think for a really long time, we took it for granted. We had a booming economy, and I think people stopped realizing that all those founders of businesses and all those businesses, they're really hard to build and keep. And we've now seen in a blink of an eye, they can be obliterated. So this is a very deep and profound thing that all these businesses have gone through. And now you're going to go and interview with these companies. And that's what I need you to think about. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope so. So what we're going to do in these interviews when we ask questions is prove to the hiring manager that we understand the situation. You understand what they've been through. And I hopefully just painted a very vivid picture for you. What I would challenge you to do as you go on future interviews is to think about that company, do your homework on that company. I mean, stalk the heck out of them, read everything that they've put out on social media and in the news over the last 3 months during this whole crisis to understand their crisis story, to understand where they're at so that you can go into this, interview situation really well prepped to offer up the right information in your answers, but then also to ask these 3 very important questions. Okay. So question number 1 that I want you to ask when it's your turn at the end of the interview and they say, do you have any questions for us? I want you to ask, what has changed the most about the company's business model as a result of the current crisis, or at this point, the recent crisis? You could say it that way too, because you want a chance for them to really talk about that with you. You want to hear what they've been through, because when they get to talk and they know that you're listening, that is one of the best feelings in the world. People love to talk about themselves. Businesses are no different. So you're sitting there with a hiring manager that's just been through a heck of a time. Of course, they've been thinking about this, about their business has changed. And of course, they want to make sure that anybody they hire understands it. So give them that chance. They may actually offer this information up in the interview, in which case maybe you won't need to ask this question. But you definitely, if they don't ask it, you want to ask it because you want to understand that. You could even take this question a step further and say, what has changed the most about your work at the company as a result of the current crisis? So if they told you about the business, and you could ask them about themselves, what has changed the most about your work at the company? You might even ask this as a 2-parter. What's changed most about the business model and how has your work changed, right? If you've got more time to ask more questions. But something around that to get them talking about that and feeling heard and understood, very, very important. Now, the second question is, what's the company's biggest concern with respect to being able to adapt and grow in the future? So again, you're letting them know you understand that the company has to adapt and grow and that it's going to want to. but what is keeping them up at night? That's another way to say that. I usually ask that because I like to be more casual in an interview. I might say, what's keeping you up at night, with respect to your ability to adapt and grow in the future. But you pick the words that are best for you, right? This is just a framework. But again, they've been thinking about this. Not only have they thought about what's changed over the last 2 months, they've also been thinking strategically about, okay, how are they going to get back on track? I mean, if they haven't, run for the hills. I mean, if they can't answer these first 2 questions, this is not a company you want to be working at, which is another reason why you ask these questions, right? We want to vet them as much as they're vetting you. If they can't say, if they're saying, I really haven't thought about it, or I'm not sure, oh, okay, run the other way. Because we all have concerns. Here I am, I'm running a company, and my team and I talk about all the time what's changed over the last 2 months, but more importantly, what are we most scared of in the future? So that's what you want to be able to talk about with them. Okay. Really get them to talk about the future. What's going to keep them up at night? What could hold them back? What are they zoning in on? And you'll see why, because really this questions 1 and 2 are the setup for the home run question number 3. How will this role that I'm applying for help the company succeed in overcoming this concern and succeed in their efforts? Like, how will the work that I will be doing in this role help make sure that you work through that and that you do succeed? How will this role that I'll be doing help you get through what you've been through and get back on track? Now, once again, hopefully they're articulating that in the interview to you. But if not, there's something to be said about asking them specifically. So maybe they talk about the business, but if you're with the hiring manager, you might say to the hiring manager, what's your biggest concern about this department that we'd be working in together? What's your biggest concern about our ability to be successful as a department? See what they have to say, and then say, this job that I would be doing for you, right? How will I be able to make sure that you succeed in what you need to do for this department? Right? So again, you're giving them a chance to say, I've thought this all out. I've thought out what happened. I've thought out what could happen in the future and that what we need to think about. And I've thought about this particular position and how it's going to help us be successful, which is awesome, because if they give you the right answers, you're going to get even more excited about this job. You're going to see the clarity of, oh my gosh, I am going to have a major impact on this company. I am going to be able to help this company win. And that's going to, make you really excited and motivated to get out of bed and go to work every day. So you want this information. They can't give you that information. What kind of motivation are you going to have? And more importantly, how are they going to know if you're doing the job right? How are they going to know if you're making a difference and justifying the cost of hiring you? How are they going to know if you are saving or making the company enough money and solving problems and alleviating pain that make it worthwhile? See, if they can't articulate this stuff, folks, then there's a concern there. There's a red flag there. And again, as I've pointed out, these 3 simple questions, you can ask about them more broadly around the company itself, but you can also ask the specific hiring manager about their concerns, their department, and how you would be able to support them. All 3 of these questions show your intellect, show how smart you are, that you understand the bigger picture. And it shows your humility, your concern, your understanding, and your appreciation for the problem. But most importantly, it shows that you understand that you are a service provider. You are a business of one. You're not an employee. You're a business of one who wants to partner with them. And a good partner is going to understand what their peer, right, what their other partner has going on, and how they can deliver and exceed their expectations to strengthen that partnership, to have that trust and mutual respect. So these 3 questions position you as a business partner who understands their role in the relationship. And this is where you really escalate your credibility and you stand out in the interview. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope so. Here's what I want you to remember, and then we're going to get down to some questions. Showing you care about the success of the business is the key here. Earlier this week, we talked about the soft skills essentially you needed, how you had to professionally present yourself, and how you needed to be in a place of acceptance about everything that's happened so that you can have that confidence and that composure and be able to share your knowledge and have vision and have humility, just have that right way about you. But asking questions that say, I get that this business succeeding and growing post-crisis, this new co succeeding post-crisis is vitally important. That's what's going to win here. That's going to be the bonus points right there, so that when it's down to you and another candidate, it's the quality of the questions that you asked that are going to show how much homework you did and how much you really understand them as a business. Okay, I hope that helped. Very excited about those. Trust me, they're the power questions. You're going to want to ask them for sure. But now what I want to do is take your questions as we continue on this topic around interviewing post-crisis. Very excited to be working with you on that. And again, a quick reminder, we have a free resource link with the 18 questions you can ask. You'll get asked on an interview. Really important that you do interview prep. Can't stress it enough. So make sure you hit that link. But let's get to it. Let's talk to John. John says, is a good question to ask, where do you see the company in 5 years, 10 years? What is your outlook in the future? Yeah, I wouldn't actually ask that question right now. It was a great question beforehand. I'm in a CEO group. I practice what I preach. I have a coach, just like you all have coaches, all my Work It Daily members out there. Everyone should have a coach. Coaching is not a sign of weakness. It's a path to greatness. It is helping you see your blind spots. It's helping you understand. So we were in this coaches meeting, this CEO meeting, and we all said our entire business models that we presented at the beginning of the year are out the window. We can't even imagine what we're going to be like in 3 or 5 years. In 10 years, there's no way to know. And any company that starts to make those assumptions right now, I would question it. So I wouldn't ask that question because I think you're going to put them on the spot. I think what you have to do is, ask more of the question around, what are you hoping to look like in a year from now? That might be a more realistic question. Or a question might be, how far out, based on all of this and how most companies have had to throw out their business models and build new companies, how far out are you trying to plan the vision for the company now? Are you looking a year out, 2 years out? That would be a better, more interesting question to ask. So the next question is it okay to ask what makes you different from your competition? It is, but that's a pretty surface question. I don't think you're going to score big points there. I would expect you to know what makes us different. If you were interviewing at Work It Daily, I sure as heck hope that you would know that what makes us different, that you've gone out and done your research about that. I think a better question to ask is to say, I've done my homework and I know what makes you different from your competition is X, Y, and Z. Can you talk me through the company's decision to make that their differentiators? Why did the company go that route? And how do you think the company's benefiting by being different from competitors in that way? See what I mean? Do your homework and take the question next level as to the thought process behind that decision. That's a more intelligent question, in my opinion. Let's see. GMW says, I have several intentional short-term consulting and contract positions in my work history. How do I place them on my resume to not look like job hopping? Well, I think the most important thing to do is after the job title, which you should have bolded, every job title should be bolded so that a recruiter skims and sees career progression. You would put contract assignment in bolded in parentheses after it. That way I know that was intentionally a contract assignment. That's what I would do there in order to make that a lot easier, in my personal opinion. Otherwise, there's not much you can do in that respect. Alex, what are some top questions to ask a recruiter? So a recruiter is a technical buyer, which simply means that the recruiter has been given a checklist of things for you to have. And if you have them and you have a good personality and you communicate well in that first interview, you're going to move to the next round. The recruiter does not have depth of knowledge. So please don't make the mistake of starting to ask a recruiter a whole bunch of in-depth questions about the job because they don't know. What the recruiter does know is that you need to meet a certain set of criteria. So if I was on the interview with a recruiter and at the end I got to ask questions, I would say, what are the 5 most important characteristics you've been told that this candidate has to have in order to move to the next round, right? So what's the checklist? What are the 5 most important things? Okay. In your opinion, am I not hitting it in any of those 5 areas? And if so, maybe I can speak to that, right? So I need to understand that if you think I'm not hitting the mark, if you're giving me points off, let me know where you're giving me points off, essentially, is what you're saying. And I can hopefully speak to that instead, right? That's the kind of thing. And then I would also ask the recruiter, give me 3 things that you look for in a candidate that you know is going to make them a good fit for the organization. I mean, you're the pro here. You're the screener. You're the person that is literally choosing who gets through to the hiring managers. So you know what this company looks for. What are those 3, intangible or soft skills that you think that every employee at this company has that you look for in a candidate? By asking that question, you're really giving a hat tip and saying to the recruiter, I understand how important your job is, and I understand what a big role you have in who gets through and who doesn't, and I want to understand what you look for, right? So those would be the questions that I would ask. Let's see. Katerina says, how long should I be waiting to hear back from a company after an interview? It has been 2 weeks. So first of all, usually when you have an interview, you ask at the end, what are the next steps in the process? And, is it okay if I follow up with you? And if so, when would it be appropriate to follow up? So normally you should ask that in an interview. If they didn't give you that interview information and you failed to ask, 2 weeks is a good amount of time before you reach out. And what you want to do is just send a quick email saying, I am following up to see if they're, and don't use the word just, please. Sometimes people put, I'm just following up. Just is an insult. It implies that they did something wrong and they didn't. You want to say, hey, hiring manager, I'm following up to see if there's anything else I can do to further my candidacy. I can only imagine how much you have going on during this crisis. But if there is anything I can provide you, please let me know. And that's it. And after that, you really can't do anymore. Folks, most companies have stopped hiring until they figured out their next step NUCO model. It's not appropriate to hire when you're layering people off. So a lot of people were mid hiring cycle and have seen everything slower grind to a halt. It's very common. And so, following up too much with a company is going to work against you because, again, that's going to show that you're tone deaf, that you're selfish and only focused on yourself without thinking about the bigger picture and what the company is going through. Everything I just talked about in today's training is about you understanding and respecting the bigger picture. So I know that wasn't what your question was, but it was a good opportunity to mention that, give yourself 2 weeks, do the very careful follow-up. And after that, it's in their court and there's nothing you can do until companies get through this and they're in a position to reach out again. Michelle says, if you're having an in-person interview, is it okay to ask if social distancing will be observed when the interview is being set up? Yeah, I think that you can. I think it's pretty much a given, but I get your point. You don't want to show up there and find out that it isn't and have it freak you out. So maybe I'd go about it in a different way. I'd say, oh, it's an in-person interview. That's great. Those are so novel these days. What can I do to ensure that I can adhere to your social distancing guidelines? Right? So be proactive. What can I do to prepare for the interview to make sure that I can adhere to your social distancing guidelines? And they'll say, oh, bring a mask, do this, we'll be 6 feet. Or they might go, oh, we don't believe in that. We're just going to have a meeting. And then that's your call whether or not you want to go on the interview or not. But if you reframe the question that way, you'll be able to get to the point of what you're really trying to understand as to whether or not they're going to enforce it. Dario says, when you have an interview, send a thank you email within 24 hours, yet do not receive any response, including the follow-up email the next week. Should I assume the worst? Yes. That's a really blunt thing to say, I know. But if you sent a thank you note, nobody acknowledged it, and then you sent a response a week later and nobody acknowledged it, something's going on. Now, when I say expect the worst, I mean the worst is that it sounds like this job's gone on hold or something's happened. I don't think that you did anything necessarily. Don't rush to the conclusion that you blew it and you're blacklisted from the organization. I would stop touching base with them. It's in their court now. There's nothing more you can do. You don't want to chase them, right? They should be following up with you. But in this day and age, with everything that's happened, please don't assume that you did anything wrong. It's not the case. It's just the company's probably overwhelmed. For all you know, the recruiter or the hiring manager got laid off. I heard about that recently. I heard somebody went on an interview. They thought they nailed it. They never heard back from the hiring manager, and they were so upset about it. And they're about to write a nasty letter, and they went to the person's LinkedIn profile and saw that they had been let go. The person's LinkedIn profile showed that they were now unemployed. So good thing, one, it would have bounced back because they don't have their email anymore. But, don't jump to conclusions. Bad things are happening to everybody, even at these companies that you're interviewing at right now. Let's see. MD says, is it okay to ask in an interview, what are the key aspects in your organization for continuous improvement? Yeah, it's a little abstract for me. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I think I would want more context. So, for me, I would say, what's your company's definition of continuous improvement? And can you give me an example of how the company, a particular department or situation that really proves that the company's focused on continuous improvement? So I'd want to know more like, what's your definition of continuous improvement, and give me an example of what continuous improvement looks like at your organization. That's a better way to ask that question, I think. Matthew says, how would you recommend asking behavioral questions around company's safety? So that's super. I mean, I think that whatever you're trying to understand about a safety situation is, you just frame the question that way. So tell me about a time where the company's safety policies really came into play, and helped avoid injury or help avoid lawsuits or something like that. Tell me about a time where the company's safety policies really saved the day. That could be one way to ask it. And walk me through an example of how the company's safety policies have really helped the organization. So those are behavioral questions where the company is required to tell you about how they use their safety policies. If they can't do that, then they don't have good safety policies, right? So you want to think about that. You could even ask the question, walk me through how the company comes up with its safety policies too, so that you can understand, is it reactionary? Is it proactive? That sort of thing. Osama says, I love these 3 questions. Oh, I'm so glad to hear about that. What about the pay expectation question that comes before the interview? So, most of the time these days, a recruiter is going to ask you in a phone screen before you move on what your salary expectations are. We have an entire class on that inside Workadaily. And that's because you need to understand how to give a range, an appropriate range, so that you don't get, tossed out of the process. So you're going to have a walkaway rate and an ideal rate. And you're going to say the reason the range is so large is that it depends on the opportunity. It depends on the benefits. It depends on, what I might be able to learn. For me, there's trade-offs. If there's a working education and an opportunity to grow, I'm going to be more flexible in my pay. So I don't want to lock myself into a particular rate, but here's my overall range. So that's how that gets said in order to make sure you're not excluded from the process. But it's really important to learn the nuances of salary negotiation. So if you haven't taken a course in that, I would suggest that you do. Deborah says, what's the best way to approach Skype or other digital interviews that would really impress the person interviewing? Oh my goodness. Well, we have a video, which I'm sure the team will share with you over on YouTube, where we talk about tips for video interviewing. And we're going to be doing a session on that in the near future. In fact, folks, just a reminder, we broadcast live here Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And the team is putting together a monthly calendar. There's no place to do that on LinkedIn. And the only place we can put it is in my LinkedIn feed. But I will tell you, we are going to be talking about that as one of our subjects in the next month. So be on the lookout for that. And we also have a free YouTube video that talks about it. But when it comes to virtual interviews, there's so much to consider right now. A neutral backdrop. One of the biggies, you need to know how to look in a camera. If you can't comfortably stare at a camera, I stare at a camera the entire time I do this session. If you don't look in a camera, it looks like you're not looking at the person. Are you filling the space? Like, do you have yourself set up correctly? Are there no distractions? Is the lighting correct? Do you have enough lighting in front of your face looking at you to brighten up your face? Really good quality microphones. A lot of times the camera, like the quality of the camera, is way less important than the quality of the sound. You want your audio to come through nice and clear. So there are a checklist of things that you want to consider, and there's definitely resources out there, but this is one of those things you want to practice and test and make sure you've gotten good shape before you go live. Chris says, thank you for doing all of this. What do you say when asked, why are you leaving your current employment? I always say I want to advance my career. Thoughts on this? I think they know you want to advance your career. You don't leave a job if it's meeting all your needs. So they know what's coming with that question. That's why they're asking it. They're basically asking you what's coming up short with your current employer, but they're asking it in a polite way. And you don't want to throw your employer under the bus, but what you want to do is talk about your vision for yourself and how you want to create more value. Saying I want to advance my career is a bit vague. I want you to be more specific and show me again that you did your homework. So I would say something like, I'm so grateful for my employer. They've taught me a lot. But I know that in the next 2 years, I want to become more of an expert in this skill set, because I know in doing so, I'll be able to create more value and save and make the company I work for more money. Unfortunately, my current employer doesn't have the ability or the desire to see me take my skill set in that area to the next level. It's just not part of their business plan. No harm, no foul. So I know it's time for me to move on and move to an organization like yours, where I can build that skill set. I can become more valuable to you. And feel, build a stronger relationship with my employer by leveraging something that I want to do to help them justify the cost of me, right? That's what I want to do. So it needs to be, you need to fill in the blanks there with your skill sets and the company that they work for. But that's the focus, right? You're not throwing your former employer under the bus. You're just saying, this is where our business plans diverge. and I've got a really clear plan for myself, and I want to provide more value to an employer. So I've got to find the employer that sees that value based on my plan. Carol says, what is the best way to follow up with a company after the first 2-week follow-up post-COVID? I say this all the time. It's a standard line. It's short and sweet, Carol. Dear hiring manager, thank you again for the opportunity to meet with you 2 weeks ago. If there is anything else I can do to further my candidacy, please let me know. I hope you're doing well, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bing, bang, boom. Now, one thing I'll tell you that's a bonus, if you can do it, that I love doing is the PS. PSs always get read. And in this case, the PS would be, PS, I saw this article or I saw this video, whatever, and it made me think about the conversation we had. I thought you'd enjoy it. So just like if you were a colleague and you saw something really timely, you would share it with everybody on the team. Find something that's timely and share it with this person. And that way, the PS, the last thing they read isn't about you checking in on a job. It's about you giving them some value and saying, hey, PS, I thought you'd really enjoy this. And they go check it out and they go, oh, yeah, that's really intelligent. That was so kind of him or her to share that with me. Wow, they're a really good candidate. I've got to remember to follow up with them, right? So use the PS, add a little value, and make yourself more memorable for the right reasons. Frederica says, how should I give my positive feedback after an interview in order to let the recruiter know I'm really interested in the position I was applying to? Well, that would be in the thank you note for sure, Frederica. So if you interview in the morning, have the thank you note to them by the afternoon. If you're interviewing in the afternoon, have it to them by the first thing in the morning. And it's a very simple thing. Thank you so much for the opportunity to interview. I am really excited about this position. I particularly loved talking about this and fill in the blank. Talk about something specific. It got me so excited. Please let me know about next steps in the process. That's it. Do not sell yourself, folks. This is so important. We have an entire tutorial on this inside Work It Daily. I cringe when I see people write these long thank you notes where they go, and I just want to remind you that with my 15 years of experience and my passion for this, I would be amazing at this. The time to sell yourself was in the interview, not in the thank you note. A thank you note is for thanks, not for sales. So thank them, point out what you loved about the interview and the discussion, thank them again, and that's it. Alex says, how do you say you're leaving your employer because you are unsatisfied with a role that you received after a restructuring? Oh, Alex, that's a great question. And you know what? That's going to happen to a lot of people. So I'm glad you asked that question. So what you want to do is follow the experience, learn, and grow model. And this is a model, this is an equation that we teach at Work It Daily to answer all questions so that it's very objective and balanced. So what you want to do is say, well, prior to this crisis, I was responsible for this, this, and this, and I really loved these 3 aspects of my job, right? So I want you to talk about the pre-crisis job and what you really loved about it. And then you want to say, well, and then understandably so, a restructuring happened. And post-restructuring, my new job became this, this, and this. And I lost the 2 out of the 3 things that I love to do. Right? And I get it. And I understand it was a business decision and they had to make it. And I respect them for it. And I am so grateful I was given a job. That said, I really miss those other aspects of my work that have been taken away. And I think that I want to get back to it. And so I decided it made sense to start looking for opportunities where I could go back and leverage and do all the things that I love to do, because I know that if I can go find that role where I'm happier, I'm also going to free up a really good role for a deserving person who will enjoy this role that the company has created. And they deserve to have somebody in it that's very enthusiastic about it. So I really want to do right by them. I want to find a new role where I feel happier and I'm more satisfied with what I'm doing. And that will give them the chance to have the right person in this role that they now need post-crisis, which again, I totally respect and understand. See what I mean? There's no villains here. It's a set of circumstances. Life happened. So before, you love this, things change. Okay, things had to change and you got taken away. You don't love it as much. You want to love it again and you want to give somebody else a chance to love it too. Right? That's all. Just map it out and everyone will understand that for sure. Melody says, how can you get helpful feedback from hiring managers if you're not moving past the phase in the hiring process? This is extremely difficult, Melody, because legally companies don't want to give you that feedback for fear of discrimination. We all get taught, and this is because too many people litigated. So many people have become litigious. They don't get a job and they want to get companies in trouble. And I get it. I am all for not, there's certain protected classes that should not be discriminated against, but companies just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to tell you what was really wrong. They don't want to risk a lawsuit. So they keep it very vague. It is extremely difficult to get that type of feedback. What I would do instead is there's a simple test to tell you whether or not you'd be in the running with this company in the future. So if you don't move on to the next round, you say, I totally understand. First of all, thank you for letting me know. That is so gracious of you to let me know. And secondly, is it possible for me to be proactive and stay on your radar screen for future opportunities? Do you think, even though I didn't make it through the round with this opportunity, do you think that I would be eligible for future opportunities and that I should pursue staying in touch and following up and applying to other jobs in the future, right? So basically you're politely asking, okay, I know I didn't get this job, but do you think that I'm good enough to get another job here with you and that I should continue my efforts in order to pursue that? Or do you think no, that it's you've kind of figured out that I'm not the right cultural fit? So it's a really polite way to ask that question so that they can say, I think that you probably wouldn't find this the best organization or the right, thing for you. Or they might say, yeah, the likelihood that we're going to have a job that fits your skill sets is probably pretty rare. I mean, you can keep an eye, but I think you might really want to pursue other opportunities. Well, that's their polite and PC way of saying you're not a right fit for the org. You're never going to get them to specifically tell you what's wrong. It's not going to happen unless, and here's a little asterisk, unless you have some really good coaches inside the organization, which is something we teach people to do. When you develop people in the organization that are your coaches or what we call your champions, those are the people that can get the inside scoop as to why you didn't get the job. And that's why you really want to have one of those at every opportunity, and why we encourage you to network as much as possible so that when you apply to a job, you've got some inside people to guide you. But if you don't have those inside people, the likelihood that you are ever going to hear some real feedback is slim to none. And that the best you can do is what I suggested around the questions to figure it out whether or not they'd even consider you for future positions. Okay. Daniel says, in a disruptive cover letter, how do you address the crisis? It really depends on what you're writing in the disruptive cover letter. So for those of you that aren't familiar with that, please check out our cover letter free resource and YouTube video. So go over to our resource page on that. But in a disruptive cover letter, you're telling a story. So if the story that you're telling, as you're applying to this job or for this industry, if there's something relative to COVID, then in the crisis, then you include it. But if not, you don't. They're not going to think that you're ignorant and that you don't know there's a crisis going on. Everybody knows it's going on. So I'm not sure that that's even necessary, again, unless there's really good context for why we should be mentioning it as part of that story that you're telling. So the answer is it depends, and more likely you won't. But if you do, it needs to be very relative to what you're telling for a story in the cover letter. Carol says, how do you answer the question, why did you leave your last job when you were let go after 1 week with the reason that it's not a good fit? Carol, we have an entire course called Fired to Hired based on this. It happens to so many people. A lot of companies, myself included, are very clear. We have a 90-day rule, and if you don't make it in 90 days, we can let you go as well. And the reason for that is there's a saying, slow to hire, quick to fire. If a company doesn't feel you're going to be a fit, they shouldn't invest the time because they've already made up their mind. And all they're going to do is prolong the inevitable, and it's worse for you. So, this team did you a favor. They knew it wasn't a fit and they let you go. That's hard to hear. But again, would you really want to struggle and be on performance review? And, I always say to people, there's no bad employers or no bad employees. The majority of the time, it's just a bad fit. And it's hard for us to accept that. But, it's not any different than dating to some degree. Are we right for every person? No. Right. And no one side is better or worse than the other. It's not a fit. And so that happens with employers too. So Carol, in your case, if they ask, the first thing, anytime they ask you a difficult question, like, why did you leave your last job? And they know that you're unemployed or whatever, folks, you always want to say, that's a great question. Because they're not expecting you to say that. They're expecting you to go, ooh, that's a hard question. Oh, that's a tough question. So when you flip it on its ear and say, that's a great question, now you've got their intention and you're very positive. And you would say, here's the facts. I got hired by the company, and 1 week later, they laid me off and said it wasn't a good cultural fit. I wish I could tell you why. I wish I could tell you that they were specific in their feedback. They weren't. I wish I could tell you that I'm savvy enough within a week to know what it was, but I'm not. It's a hard one for me. The lesson learned there is that, sometimes there's just not a good fit and you need to accept it. But it's made me really careful about where I look for work now to make sure that I am a fit and, that I know that I'm going to be successful in the role. So don't know what I could have done differently other than maybe vet the company more on the front end, but I own it. It is what it is. And, it's an experience that taught me something and I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow and I'm going to make the best of it. See what I mean? You want to take that experience and show that it was powerful. And this is what you've walked away with. And you're taking ownership for it. And there's no bad blood, right? You've accepted it. It is what it is. Here's how you're making the most of it. And here's why you're excited to be talking to them. That's how you want to answer that question. It does take some finessing and practice, though. And that's why it's a good idea to work with a coach until you can get to a place where you can answer that question in a very confident tone, because they can tell when somebody's faking it and it'll work against you if you're not really authentic when you answer that question in the way that I just described. Really quick before I take Ryan's question, just a reminder for those that you have just hopped on, I am doing a live training tomorrow, a live webinar called 5 Mistakes to Avoid in Your Post-Crisis Job Search. So if you are going to be looking for work after the crisis, you and as of today, 33 million other Americans, 5 mistakes that you want to avoid. This is the stuff that nobody teaches you in school. These are all the mistakes that society has taught us to make that I don't want you to make. So, there's not going to be 33 million people on the call tomorrow, but I will tell you the people that are on this call are really going to have an eye opener around the classic mistakes that people make and how, if you minimize this, you're going to be able to stand out in what will be the most competitive job market in the history of the United States and the world for that matter. So come join me. It's free. It's 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. I know my team's popping up the invite. That way you can opt in and you can get reminders and email reminders so that you can join me tomorrow. Okay. All right. Question from Ryan is, how do I tell the potential employer that I got laid off? Do I straight up tell them I got laid off? Not proactively, Ryan. They're going to ask you, Ryan, what happened at your last job? Ryan, why'd you leave your last job? And you're just going to say, I got laid off. Yeah, I got laid off. Especially, Ryan, if other people got laid off. So if other people got laid off, you could say, I was one of 30 people that got laid off. And they told us the reason was COVID-19. If you're the only one, you might say, yep, I was the only one. And, I asked why. They just said it was this, or this. And hey, you know what? I got to tell you, it's really hard on me because I'm a hardworking person and nobody likes to be laid off. And of course, I think that part of it's my fault. And I just have to realize that I have to go out there and find my next opportunity. And I'll tell you something, whoever hires me is going to get the most hardworking person ever because I'm going to want to prove that former employer wrong and really be an outstanding, exceptional performer so it doesn't happen again, right? So we keep talking about experience, learn, and grow. Don't be shy. Tell them that this experience was powerful and profound, and it's going to make you work even harder to make sure that your next employer loves you. That's what they want to hear, that you get it. So Laura says, I applied for open calling for a training to hire person. Training to hire position. So I applied for a training to hire position. Told they would get back to me within 48 hours. It's been 3 weeks. I followed up virtually, still nothing. Is there anything else I can do? Nope, Laura, this is another one of those examples. And it's so hard. And I hate to be the messenger on this, but if they needed you, they would have contacted you by now. But remember, it's not that there's anything wrong with you. Everything is blown up. I can't tell you how many people were like, I just got off the phone and had the interview of my lifetime and they told me all about the next steps. And the next day I got a message saying, we're putting it on hold. Or they went completely silent on me. And a week and a half later, I found out the recruiter's gone. You don't know. People are getting sideswiped every single day. So don't read too much into it. It is what it is. Move on. Find a new opportunity or opportunities to focus on. Or in this case, folks, with so many companies not hiring yet, what you need to be doing is creating a bucket list. If you don't know what a bucket list is, please get some help on that. We call it the interview bucket list. It's a list of companies that you put together that you admire and respect the products and the services that they create and deliver, and that you have a deep understanding as to why you respect it. So you can tell a personal or professional story that ties how you've come to learn that what they do is fantastic. This interview bucket list is key because having that list lets you target your efforts in your networking and your career planning. It is so important for you to have an interview bucket list. So make sure that you're doing something like that right now so that when companies start to hire again, you are focused on these companies and you're going to be some of the first to know about the fact that they are hiring because you're keeping tabs on them. Jessica says, in the end of an interview, when it is asked if you have any questions and nothing comes to your mind because you've already talked a while about everything, is it bad to say no further questions? Well, Jessica, one thing I would do is I would come with a notebook or something, not because I want you to take notes. Please don't ever take notes in an interview. It's very distracting. But I would have a list of questions that you've thought about in advance that you really want to make sure get asked. And what I would say is if you think that they all got answered, sometimes we lose our mind. You can say, I feel like you answered all my questions. I brought a notebook. If you don't mind, I'm just going to pull it out and take a quick look. I had 10 main questions that I wanted to make sure I got answered. And I think they've all been answered. I just want to take a quick check. And you do that pretty quickly in a timely fashion. And usually you might find one or two things that like jar your memory that you want to ask, because what you don't want to do, and here's the point I'm trying to make, Jessica, is if you look at them and go, no, I think you answered everything. And then you walk out the door and you have questions, too late. You can't email them and go, I realize I do have questions. Can you answer these? Too late. Cannot do it. So that's why I want you to go with your big list of questions. And even if you feel like they all got answered, pull that list out really quickly and make sure, because you don't want to get home and realize you have some questions because you will not be able to get those answered. And it really reflects poorly on you if you try to ask them after the fact. Excellent. Oh my goodness, team. All right. So we are going to wrap it up for today. Last reminder, come hang out with me tomorrow, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, 9 Pacific, for a free training on the 5 mistakes you want to avoid when looking for work in the post-crisis era, right? Can't wait for you to join me on that. I hope that you've downloaded all of our free resources that we've talked about today, especially the common interview questions. And remember that these recordings are all live. They show up on YouTube, and they show up if you follow the hashtag JT Talks Jobs here on LinkedIn, for example. Follow the hashtag JT Talks Jobs. All of the previous recordings are stored there so that you can go back and watch them. But I really do hope you found today in this concept of what questions to ask enlightening. It shows your intellectualness, your humility. It really shows you how prepared you are and how much you understand the organization and all that it's going through in these crazy times. Remember, nobody is getting away from this unscathed in some way, and that includes businesses. And the more that you can recognize that and understand that when they start hiring, the better. Okay? Excellent. All right. Thank you everyone again for stopping by. Always enjoy. I just want to say, I don't know what I would do without you. We are having so much fun doing these sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. At the end of each session, I just like to take the moment to say thank you, because they're only as good as the attendees. And you all are amazing. The questions that you ask, the energy that you bring to these sessions, it means so much to me. It's why we love what we do at Work It Daily. And so thank you for that. I love being with you Tuesdays and Thursdays. I would love to be with you more, so we could be together a lot more if you would come over and join us at Work It Daily. So if you're one of those people that have said, I don't really know what they do, hey, take a whopping 5 minutes today. Head over to our pricing page, learn what we're about, find out what we are, the Peloton of career. That's right. I'm going to get that Work It Daily, the Peloton of career. It's going to be my new t-shirt, I think. Come check us out. I promise you won't be disappointed. You'll love being a part of us. Awesome. All right, everyone. Thanks again. Hopefully I'll see you back here tomorrow. Until next time, remember, if you want to win, you got to work it daily.